Please make note of the chat feature on your screen. Please use the chat for communications as we will not be taking questions by audio. Aaron Kyle of Dewberry is monitoring the chat and will try to help you with any technical matters. Please post to everyone when using the chat. We are offering 1 hour of continuing education credits for CFMs. To receive credit, you must be logged in separately, answer all poll questions during the session, and provide your name and email at the end of the presentation. Poll questions should appear as a pop-up on the screen, but may appear in the chat box. If you're having issues answering the poll questions, please check that chat box and use the radio buttons to respond. A copy of the presentation will be emailed to all attendees. Also, a survey link will be provided at the end of the presentation. We appreciate you completing the survey so that we may improve these webinars in the future. We are recording today's webinar and plan to post the video on georgiadfirm.com. With that, let's get started. Today's presentation is an introduction to the community rating system. Our presenter is Becca Fricke-Croft. Becca is a senior project manager, floodplain management and training lead for Atkins, and a consultant to the CRS program. In 2021, Becca sold her house, truck, and everything in them and bought a motorhome, which she now lives in full-time. She traveled to 48 states also in 2021, including visiting her mother's family in Marietta, Georgia. And with that, I'll now turn it over to Becca.
Thank you so much for that introduction, and thank you for having me today. So here's our agenda for today. I'm going to cover a very basic introduction to the community rating system, including concepts that drive the program. I'll introduce you to the CRS Coordinator's Manual, which has all of the answers that you need for the community rating system, everything CRS. I'll talk about how a community can get points and how points lead to insurance discounts for policyholders in your community. And then I'll talk about the benefits and the costs of participation from the community's perspective or the local government's perspective. And if you're interested in joining the CRS, I will show you how to do that. And then finally, we'll show you where you can get resource or help with additional training, online resources, and the staff that you can contact if you have questions. The Community Rating System, or the CRS, is a flood insurance rating program that's administered by FEMA, which also runs the National Flood Insurance Program. Communities participate in the NFIP to make federally backed flood insurance available and to be eligible for disaster assistance. Any community that participates in the NFIP can participate in the CRS, and it is a voluntary program. Currently, there are over 22,000 communities in the NFIP, and about 7% of those communities have joined the CRS. That seems like a really small percentage, but those communities actually represent over 70% of all flood insurance policies. The CRS program has 3 goals. The first goal is to reduce flood damage to insurable property. Insurable property is another word for buildings, things with 2 walls and a roof that can be covered by the NFIP. The NFIP insures buildings from flood damage, so whatever communities can do to reduce the potential for damage, and thereby reducing the potential for paying an insurance claim, the community rating system wants to support that. The second goal of CRS is to address the insurance aspects, and communities really can do a lot to help the NFIP and get credit in CRS. You can encourage more people to have a flood insurance policy, so there's a larger policy base, and therefore more people paying premiums and a reduced chance that a bad flood in any one particular location would threaten the program as a whole. Communities can also help with the flood data that's used to rate buildings. More accurate floodplain mapping and more accurate base flood elevations can make a big difference for actuarial insurance rates. And the third goal is to have a comprehensive floodplain management program at the community level. If your community cares not just about the minimum NFIP requirements of protecting buildings, but also looks at things like protecting streets, protecting utilities and natural floodplain functions. All those activities add up to a better overall program with better protection for buildings and what the insurance program has exposed. The CRS Coordinator's Manual is a 600+ page document that has everything you need to know about the CRS. The CRS coordinator is the local official that's responsible for the implementation of the activities at that community. So it's written to the perspective of that local official. The current manual had a 2020 expiration date on the cover, but it actually is still effective. In January 2021, instead of publishing a new manual, CRS released an addendum to the CRS Coordinator's Manual, which added a few new credits and modified a few elements. In 2021, the addendum and the CRS 2017 Coordinates Manual together became the official statement of the CRS credits and the procedures. These two documents will remain effective until fully revised, and a new edition of the CRS Coordinator's Manual is issued in the future. But for now, they are both the governing manuals for the program. You can download both of these documents and the addendum, over-clicking there, at FEMA.gov and also at crsresources.org. The PDF versions really make digital searches for key terms very easy. It's way more efficient than printing out the 600 pages. It seems pretty overwhelming. You have, hundreds and hundreds of pages of material. But if you open up the manual, you'll see that it's pretty well organized. We have all the sections numbered so that you can cross-reference the activities with different section numbers in different publications. The 100 series introduces the CRS program. The 200 series talks about procedures like the application process and the verification process. And then starting with the 300 series, the manual covers the activities that communities do to get credit. Those activities are organized under 4 general series of things that can be done at the local level to work towards the 3 goals of CRS. The first series is the public information series. That's the 300 series. The 300 series provides credit for activities like outreach projects, mailings to people in the floodplain, billboards, websites, technical assistance, map information, real estate disclosure, all sorts of different things that can be done to advise people about the flood hazard and to encourage them to take steps to protect themselves from the flood hazard, things like buying flood insurance or retrofitting their buildings. The 400 series provides credit for activities that deal with new development. For example, mapping the floodplain, mapping it more accurately, for keeping parts of the floodplain undeveloped, for higher standards for permitting in the floodplain, for stormwater management regulations. The 500 series provides credit for what a community does to minimize or reduce losses to development that's already out there. By development, again, I'm referring to buildings. If you have buildings getting damaged, what can communities do? Well, you can buy them out, you can elevate the buildings, you can maintain drainage systems, and you can come up with flood protection plans, mitigating repetitive losses. The 600 series is for the emergency manager. These are activities that can be done before, during, and after a flood to minimize property damage. But again, under that third goal, what can be done to minimize suffering, public health hazards, and loss of life? So these 4 series form the framework for 19 specific activities that can get credit. Within those 19 activities are 98 individual elements or 98 specific ways where points can be provided for what a community does. There's actually only 97 specific elements. The additional one is called Other Higher Standards, And that means that if your community is regulating to a higher standard that's not already documented or something that we hadn't thought of in the book yet, we try to figure out a way to give you credit, provided that that activity is both above and beyond the minimum requirements for the NFIP and that that activity will work towards one of those 3 goals. So 600 pages, 4 series, 19 activities, 98 elements, and a partridge in a pear tree. That's overwhelming at first. So we have a handout that I can provide with the materials after the session today. It's also available at crsresources.org that lists the 4 series, the 19 activities, and all of the elements in 2 handy pages. You'll notice that for each element on this handout, there's a column that says max. Draw a little arrow there. And this column lists the maximum number of points that each element can earn. For example, additional map data gets up to 160 points. Most communities don't get the max. They'll get a smaller number that's based on how much they actually do. But the CRS specialist will work with you and look at what you're doing, add up all your points, and they'll give you a total number of points based on your community's level of effort. The total number of points for all communities' activities determines the CRS class, as shown here. Every 500 points gets 1 class improvement. A class 10 community doesn't have enough to have 500 points, and so they'll get 0 flood insurance premium discount. Technically, we have over 20,000 class 10 communities because they either haven't joined the program, they don't have enough points to get to that next level, or some communities have dropped out for one reason or another. You may have heard about changes in flood insurance that have changed the way that flood insurance policies are rated. And one of the changes in 2021 is that premiums are no longer rated based on just the flood zone or, in or out of the floodplain methodology that has been the standard since the beginning of the program. The impact on CRS here is that the community's discount under CRS will apply to all flood insurance policies under the NFIP within that participating community, with a few exceptions. More information on this can be found at FEMA.gov. Before you get, actually, do we have a poll question?
Yeah. Let me jump in here. So I'm gonna start the poll now. So if you would like to receive a 1-hour CFM continuing education credit, please answer the poll question. It should appear as a pop-ups on your screen, so please use the buttons there to answer. And if you don't see that as a pop-up, please check the chat. And I'm just going to give a few minutes for everyone to review the question and answer the poll.
Yeah, thank you so much. The question here is to look at this chart and determine how many points you need for a CRS Class 7 and how much of a discount that would provide for your policyholders in your community.
Just looking for a few more responses, so I'll give you about 10-15 more seconds and then I'll close up the poll. The poll has been closed, and you can see the results shown on the screen. 100% answered 1,500 points and 15% discount.
Thank you. Yeah, so every 500 points gives you a class improvement, and properties in the floodplain, or actually in the entire community, will get a 5% discount on their flood insurance premiums under the NFIP. So yes, a class 7 needs 1,500 points, and that's a 15% reduction in premiums. But before you get too excited about the potential for a 45% discount, let's see what most communities are actually getting. This graph shows that the majority of the communities that are participating in the CRS are coming in at a class 6, 7, 8, or 9. That shouldn't surprise you too much, because those are the classes that need the fewest points. However, a few decades ago, the class 9 column in this graph was the tallest, and now you can see that that curve is moving to the right. Communities typically join at a class 8 or class 9, and then over the years, they'll improve their programs, they'll document that they're doing more, and they will improve their classes over time. You'll notice that there's a big difference between class 5 and class 4. That is because it takes more than just points to advance to some of these classes, and there are prerequisites for certain classes. And the prerequisites for class 4 include having a comprehensive floodplain management plan. And so that is a barrier for some communities to moving further up, even though they have enough points. They don't meet the prerequisites to move forward. There are prerequisites for class 9 and others, but there is a little bit of a drop when you get to that class 4. We only have about 25 communities of the 1,504 that are class 1, 2, 3, and 4. We call these our star communities, and you'll see that they're indicated on this map with the stars. CRS communities are found in all 10 FEMA regions and in the state of Georgia. We have coastal communities, we have inland communities, large counties, small cities. Any NFIP participating community can join the CRS. Once the community applies to join the CRS, a CRS specialist will conduct what's called a verification visit. This visit usually lasts about 1 to 3 days, depending on the number of activities, the size of your community. And during this visit, they'll go through everything that you could be getting credit for, even if you don't intend to do it or apply for that credit, and they'll run down what's required for the documentation. The CRS specialist will leave this meeting with documentation that will be reviewed by other CRS staff, and eventually will go to FEMA to get a CRS classification. I'll cover this in more detail shortly, but this process takes about 6 to 24 months. Once the community is in the CRS, there's a yearly recertification to make sure that your community is still doing everything that you were getting credit for at the time of the first visit. And there the community will provide examples of the various activities that they were doing, such as your outreach projects that you were doing throughout the year. If at any time your community wants to change or modify its class, it can submit for what's called a modification. In most cases, that will trigger another verification visit. But even if, oops, excuse me, too many clicks. But even if you're happy with your class, you will still have a periodic verification visit. The cycle for most communities is every 5 years. Class 1 through 5 communities, and those that have a very large discount in measured in dollars, are on a 3-year cycle. So you'll have a verification visit every 3 to 5 years, even if you don't want to change your class. In addition to the formal contacts, the CRS specialist will usually attend state floodplain management conferences. You may be able to work with them through users groups. They're always available by phone or email. So you'll have multiple opportunities throughout the year to connect with your specialist, in addition to the formal annual recertification and verification. So what does it take to be in the community rating system? Well, there are 6 things that you need to do or be doing before you can join. The first is that you have to be in the National Flood Insurance Program in the regular phase for at least 1 year. Most communities are already in this situation. We'll need word from the FEMA regional office, in your case, FEMA Region 4, that your community is in full compliance with the minimum criteria of the NFIP, which is usually determined by a community assistance visit or a CAV. You'll also need to be keeping elevation data for new construction in the floodplain using the FEMA elevation certificate. Most communities are doing that anyway. About 2/3 of the CRS communities have repetitive loss properties, and those are properties where over any 10-year period, there have been 2 or more flood insurance claims paid for $1,000 or more. And these repetitive loss properties are the chronic drag on the NFIP. So one of the prerequisites is that you'll need to map out these properties and see if there's anything that can be done to address or reduce their repetitive loss, repetitive flood damage. Your community CEO, Chief Executive Officer, will have to officially declare that every community-owned building that is required to have a flood insurance policy does have one. These are usually buildings in the special flood hazard area that have received federal grants or assistance, but that's really just a minimum. We really recommend that you have policies on all of your community-owned buildings inside the special flood hazard area. You'll find that you're in much better shape after the next flood. When you have a flood insurance study done in a coastal area, in order to be in the CRS, you have to agree to have the LMWA, the limit of moderate wave action, to appear on your final firm. And these are the 6 prerequisites to get into the program. They're also required to stay in the program. If at any time FEMA finds out that you're not in full compliance with the minimum criteria of the NFIP, they'll take away all your points and you'll be back to a class 10. That does happen from time to time, but it's not permanent. You can make the corrections that you need to and come back into the program. That has happened as well. One community was actually on FEMA NFIP probation and now is a CRS class 5 community. So a lot of people will ask how much it costs to join, and that's a hard question to answer. The cost to join the CRS will vary based on the level of interest and effort that your community has. Initially, you will have staff costs associated with passing that community assistance visit to make sure you're fully compliant with the minimum requirements of the NFIP. That may include some of the cost to correct violations that you have that need to be rectified. You will have ongoing staff costs for the CRS coordinator and for the other departments that are involved with the activities. These might be things like your public information office, the permit office, your building officials, your city or county engineer, or the public works department. But the biggest cost is doing good floodplain management, doing the things that get credit. You do not want to apply for activities that you have no intention to keep doing. You'll have to maintain records of what you're doing. You will participate in the recertification process annually and the verification process every 3 to 5 years. So it's very, very difficult for me to put a number on that in dollars. It is a question of how much time and effort your community is willing to invest. But maybe these will give you some idea of what it might take to be a member of the community rating system. Why would you do all this? Well, the number one benefit is that you will save residents in your community money. Money that would otherwise go to pay for higher flood insurance premiums will stay in your community, and you tell the mayor to be spent at local businesses, right? Well, how much money will you be saving? We can help with that too. What you're looking at here is an example of what we call the what if scenario. You can get this report from your CRS specialist, your NFIP state coordinator, and the FEMA regional office. They all have access to this table. What it shows is the number of policies in force in your community, the total premium being paid, and the average premium for each flood zone. This example here is a community in Florida with a lot of flood insurance policies, and these are some pretty impressive numbers. It's a CRS class 7 which means every year they have $800,000 being saved in that community, not being spent on flood insurance premiums. Each individual is saving a little bit more than $100 or $150. And again, that's every year. So these are some pretty impressive numbers. They'll be even more impressive on the chart because that discount is actually being extended to all policies in the community. Some communities don't have 8,000 policies, but they do have residents that are still saving a lot of money. Here's another community that has only 100 policies. It's a class 8, but their floodplain residents are saving even more than the others in the other example because their premiums are higher. So you can look at these numbers and decide how you want to use them, but I don't want you to put all the weight of your decision to join the CRS on the direct savings. I don't want you to say, well, it's only going to save the community $30,000, and that's not worth my time. There really are other benefits to joining the CRS. For example, property owners who pay for protection measures with their stormwater utilities or property taxes may actually see those fees offset by their individual savings on flood insurance. In some cases, you'll find with a class 7 or even a class 8 that people are saving more money on their insurance premium than they're paying for those taxes or stormwater fees. Communities also benefit from better coordination between departments or from enhancing current programs for additional credit. And communities benefit from the technical assistance that CRS provides for things like stormwater management and stormwater planning. When public information is one of your activities, your residents are more aware about flood protection and what your community is doing, and you'll end up with a constituency for better floodplain management. And finally, there's an incentive to keep the programs going. When your community hasn't experienced a major flood for a few years, there can be pressure from developers to lower floodplain development standards, right? Sometimes people forget the importance of good floodplain management and they want you to eliminate programs or they want you to lower higher standards. CRS communities are motivated to maintain these programs because losing the credits might raise their insurance premiums for their residents. So take a look at this slide here and the list of benefits that I've gone over. And we have a poll coming where you're going to be asked to select which of these benefits are most interesting to you. And I believe you can select more than one.
Again, the poll question should appear on your screen as a pop-up, and you can select multiple options for this question. Again, if it doesn't pop up, please check the chat, and I'm going to give a few moments to review the question and answer. And I'll give about 10 more seconds to answer the poll for anyone who hasn't, and then I will close it up. And you should now see the results on the screen.
Do not. Mitigation.
So thank you for that feedback. As you can see, there's many benefits and many communities are motivated by the financial impacts of participating, but there are other benefits and we're glad to see that you see benefit in all of those. So recent reforms to flood insurance rating have motivated a lot of communities to look at ways to reduce the cost of flood insurance. Maybe your community would be motivated to do so many things that you could be a Class 1 community and save residents a whopping 45% on their flood insurance premiums every year. There's only 2 communities in the whole country that have reached that status. That's Roseville, California, and Tulsa, Oklahoma. Most likely, if you join the CRS, you're going to start at a Class 7, 8, or 9 and see a 5 to 15% decrease in your premiums. But remember that flood insurance rates for a given structure are based on several factors, including its location, the structural features, the building's elevation, as well as its replacement cost value and the claims history. And you see here from this illustration that what reduces the premiums for these buildings is mitigation, elevating buildings and building in a way that will reduce the flood losses. So that's a better way to reduce more directly reduce the flood insurance premiums. CRS has a variety of credits that help support mitigation. M.A.P information programs that tell people about the flood hazard. Outreach projects, websites, one-on-one technical assistance to inform residents about flood insurance and retrofitting measures, improving flood maps so the true hazard is really reflected, and in particular, higher regulatory standards. The CRS wants you to think about the big picture. Think in terms of not only joining for the reduced premiums, but joining to do things in your community that will reduce flood risks and therefore improve or reduce flood insurance premiums. So now that you're all excited about joining the CRS, let's talk about how you do it. The first thing that we'll need is a letter of interest from your chief executive officer. That's the mayor, city manager, the chairman of the board, whoever your chief executive is. That letter must say to the FEMA regional office, we'd like to join the CRS, and here's the person who we are designating as our CRS coordinator. And then we'll need to know that you're doing enough that would give your community at least 500 points. For that, we have a tool called the Quick Check. The Quick Check will, it's an Excel file that lists most of the activities that you can get credit for. It doesn't list all of them, but it identifies in yellow which of the credits are implemented by, I think, 70% more of the communities or so. So as you go through this tool, you can mark the activities that you're already doing. You can mark the activities that you could be doing, and then get a general idea of what points you could expect. After your Quick Check and your letter are submitted, FEMA will send a CRS specialist out to do the verification visit. Unless the FEMA region has a reason to believe that you or not know if you're fully compliant with the NFIP, then they may ask the specialist to wait. During the visit, the specialist will collect information. This is the visit that takes 1 to 3 days, where they go over everything that you're doing, even if you didn't check it off on the Quick Check. And they want to talk to you about what you're doing. And they'll also talk to people from other departments that do the implementation. They'll tour the floodplain, and then they'll send all the documentation to FEMA. Most likely, there will need to be a community assistance visit or CAV. That's the audit where they determine whether or not they can formally notify the CRS specialist that your program is NFIP compliant. This may need to happen before your verification visit. But after everything is done, FEMA headquarters will notify you of your new CRS class, and the discount will go into effect usually in October or April or May. And your residents will start getting the discount on policies that are sold or renewed after your effective date. So now you know all the steps and some of the resources. Where do you start? Well, in every case, I will tell you to talk to your specialist. To find out the name and contact information for your specialist, you can go to crsresources.org and contact them by phone or by email. That's Emily Schmidt, I think, in Georgia. You can find out if your specialist will be in the area. They may be able to drop by for a virtual or schedule a virtual meeting and then talk to you about the next steps. We recommend that you get a copy of the CRS manual and the addendum. That's where all the details are that the specialist will use when she walks through your community's program. Check those 6 prerequisites. Remember, the number 1 prerequisite is that community assistance visit. Do you know when your last CAV was done? Do you have the final paperwork? If not, you may want to talk to your FEMA regional office or your state's NFIP coordinator, who may do the CAV on FEMA's behalf. Another good suggestion is to go for the low-hanging fruit. Look at what you're already doing that fits into any of those CRS activities. You might have thought about that already, but you can also go out of your office and go down the hall and talk to other departments that may be doing things that are related to flood risk. Public Works, Emergency Management, the Public Information Officer. They all may be doing some things that could be low-hanging fruit for you. We also recommend that you go up as far as you can in the chain of command to verify that you have the financial and the political support for CRS. If you apply for the program and you put in an application that says we're going to be cleaning the drainage ditches every year, make sure that your city intends to keep funding that program. Make sure that the mayor is willing to stand by those really tough regulations that you're going to enact or that you have already enacted. You don't want to tell the CRS specialist that you're doing something and then have that program taken away. So once you've got all that done, you run through the quick check, you send in your letter, you do all the paperwork, and then the CRS specialist will be able to come and visit you. It's a big job, right? Big manual. Now there's an addendum. You have to do all this coordination with all the different departments. There may be cases where, where you'd like a little help. We have lots of resources to assist you. The number 1 resource is your CRS specialist. Again, you can go to the CRS website, crsresources.org. You can go to the FEMA regional office. They've all got help. We have websites, publications. We have examples of other communities' activities. It's also good to go to other CRS communities to see how they're doing it and what advice they would give you and your local officials when you implement the program. In many cases, CRS communities are organized into users groups. So I'm going to talk about 2 of these resources in particular. There are 2 websites with more information about CRS. FEMA.gov is the official home for information about the community rating system. Here you can get a PDF copy of the manual and the addendum. You can also find resources like the CRS Quick Check and other forms, and you can get a list of all of the CRS communities as a PDF or Excel file, in case you want to know who in your neighborhood may already be participating. More detailed information, including the CRS manual, the application, and the quick check, can be found at crsresources.org. That's crsresources.org. Here you can find information on the individual activities and elements. This is a temporary site that has more resources that can currently be found at FEMA.gov, and eventually FEMA will migrate all the tools to the new official website, but for now, this is a companion website for technical resources, templates, and tools at crsresources.org. You can see here at CRS Resources on the 100 series tab that there's the contact information for all of the specialists by state. You can get their phone number and email address, and then you can also get the contact information for your CRS regional coordinator if you have additional questions. Also at CRS Resources, as you can find these handy maps. This is a map of Florida that shows the participation statewide by how many policies they have and what classes they are. So again, if you wanted to see what your neighbors are doing, CRS resources is a really good place to start. The other great resources we have are those CRS users groups. These are informal groups of CRS coordinators who get together maybe every month or two to talk about the CRS. They share information. They may have a visiting speaker. Their CRS specialist may be attending. And some of them meet online, so you don't even have to travel. In most cases, what they do is they find someone amongst themselves who's getting a lot of credit for a particular activity. They'll ask that person or several communities that are doing well to come and talk to the group about how they're doing it. Some users groups have websites, some have newsletters. They all do it differently, and there's no really requirement for a group. But FEMA loves to have these groups because they can get communities connected to each other and keep them updated and informed about the CRS. Here's a map. You can see there's a CRS group in Georgia, the Coastal Georgia group. I'm sure that other groups in the area would be more than happy to have guests from non-coastal communities. We have more than 40 users groups around the country, obviously a lot of them in the Southeast, where there's a lot of CRS interest. There are a lot of groups that formed in the area that was hit by Superstorm Sandy in 2012, and most states have a group, and some of the regional associations have groups as well. Like I said, they meet online. Sometimes they have attendees from other areas. So if you don't have a group in your area, you can reach out to a neighboring group and contact your specialist for ideas. The number one tool here, though, is to talk to your CRS specialist. That's really where you want to start. So what I set out to do today is to give you an idea about the basics, the goals of the CRS program, how it works. We talked about the CRS Coordinators Manual, which really is what you need to dig into the details. We talked about how you get points and how points convert to classes and what classes mean in terms of insurance premium reductions. We talked about the costs and the benefits of joining the CRS, how to apply to join, and where the resources are for getting assistance. I'll also include that handout that identifies where the websites are so you can get additional information. This is intentionally a very introductory webinar. It's part of a series of trainings that we have on the community rating system. You can find a full schedule of all of the webinars in the CRS series at crsresources.org/training. And with that, I will turn it over to our hosts for questions.
Thank you so much, Becca. We did have a really good question. How can we find repetitive lost buildings?
That's an excellent question. That data is closely held and monitored, but you can get it from your FEMA regional office. You may have to jump through some hoops to get it, but contact your CRS specialist at the region, and they should be able to answer that question more fully if they can't provide the data.
Great. Also, if my county started the application process more than a year ago but was unsuccessful in completing certain elements, should we restart the application process or just pick up from where we left off?
I would contact your specialist to see what the status is of the application. They would be able to answer that question better. Each situation is unique, but if it was a question of eligibility, then you may need to start over. And if it was just something that hadn't been finished yet, then maybe the specialist can pick up where they left off. Good question.
That is good information to know. By the way, yeah, we just had the revised elevation certificates and flood-proofing forms sent
What?
out.
We did?
Yeah, I was shocked. When do we have to start using those things?
Last week, Friday, July 7th, 2023. So if our community is participating in the CRS and you are collecting elevation certificates to document compliance with your ordinance, then all elevation certificates that were done on or after July 7th, 2023 must be on the new form. No exceptions. I am so sorry.
Hey, Emily, This is
Yes.
Bruce. Let's go ahead and send out that link when we send out the PowerPoint presentation, so everybody has that.
Well, I'm hoping that everybody has already received that either through the GAFM email that went out or the email that went out from Georgia DNR Flood Unit, but we'll certainly make sure that that's available to everyone as well. So if you didn't get it or you're having problems with the links, or because I know some people were having issues with the PDFs open, just shoot us an email. We'll get right on that to you.
There will be other training that FEMA will be offering through ASFPM and other channels. So more complete training will be coming on the new elevation certificate, specifically about the changes to this new version of the form.
Yes, thank you. You also mentioned a what if report.
Mm-hmm.
How would I get a hold of that what if report?
Well, you can call your CRS specialist, but you can also contact your state's NFIP coordinator. Anybody know who that is in Georgia? Or you can call your FEMA regional office. They all have access to that report.
Fantastic. And you mentioned that there's a coastal users group in Georgia. Do you know if there's a way to start forming a users group if anybody's interested in doing that?
Yeah, talk to your specialist. They'll put you in touch with the CRS users group coordinator.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Becca. I do appreciate it because this has truly been very informative. And I hope everybody else that's listening in on this feels so much better and is all excited about potentially joining the community rating system or understanding more of what they need to do to help them improve classes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're going to keep the chat open for a few more minutes, just so if anybody else has a question, go ahead, throw it in there. Include your email address, please, so we can follow up with you on that. And I just want to make sure everybody sees on the screen, our next Lunch and Learn is going to be scheduled for September 6th from 12 to 1. NOAA's Laura Bellinger with the Weather Forecast Office and Todd Hamill of the Southeast River Forecast Center will be presenting Flooding, a Year-Round Danger in Georgia. Please join us in learning more about how NOAA helps Georgia residents prepare for floods. Also, please make note of the survey link. It's also in the chat as well. We greatly appreciate you completing those surveys because they do help us improve these webinars. And for everyone who's interested in continuing education credits for today's session, we are offering that one continuing education credit available only to certified floodplain managers that completed the polling questions and provided their name and email address in the chat now. A copy of the presentation will be emailed to all attendees. If you requested continuing education credits, those certificates will be emailed separately. Once more, our next Lunch and Learn is scheduled for September 6th, and the registration link is on the screen. If you miss it or you can't copy it down quite fast enough, don't worry. We'll also be sending an email out with the invitation for that one as well. Thank you again. Thank you, Becca. I enjoy listening to you do these presentations all the time, so I appreciate you taking a few minutes to spend with us today. And for those who don't have any other questions, this does end our Lunch and Learn webinar. Everybody have a great day.